Welcome to True Crime Threads, where we unravel the darkest mysteries, one thread at a time. Today we dive into the chilling story of Mia Chozen, a woman whose life was tragically cut short by the very people she trusted most. Mia Chozen's life seemed like something out of a dream. At 28, she was the picture of success. Intelligent, ambitious, and strikingly beautiful. Her marriage to James Whitmore, the heir to one of the most prominent and wealthy families in the state, only added to the allure of her seemingly perfect life. The Whitmores were local legends, known for their sprawling estate, luxury cars, and influence that stretched across business and politics. James was the golden boy, charming, handsome, and adored by everyone who crossed his path. To the outside world, Mia had it all: a loving husband, a life of luxury, and a future that glittered with promise. But behind the glossy facade of social media posts and lavish parties, cracks began to form in Mia's picture-perfect life. Those closest to her noticed subtle changes. Mia, once vibrant and outgoing, became quieter, more reserved. She confided in her best friend Sarah during a rare moment of vulnerability. James, she revealed, wasn't the man everyone thought he was. He was controlling, often dictating where she could go, who she could see, and even what she could wear. He had slowly isolated her from her family and friends, making her increasingly dependent on him. Mia admitted that she felt trapped, but she held on to hope that things would improve. After all, she loved James, and she believed he loved her too. Then there was Jack Whitmore, James's father. Jack was a formidable figure, cold, calculating, and fiercely protective of the family's reputation. From the beginning, it was clear that Jack disapproved of Mia. He saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't fit into the Whitmore dynasty. Mia often felt his icy gaze during family gatherings, as though he were constantly judging her. Jack's disapproval weighed heavily on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was always watching, always waiting for her to make a mistake. Despite the growing tension, Mia tried to make the best of her situation. She threw herself into her career, excelling at her job as a marketing executive. She also tried to bridge the gap with James, suggesting couples therapy and making efforts to reconnect with the man she had fallen in love with. But James's behavior only grew more erratic. His temper flared over the smallest things, and his controlling tendencies became more pronounced. Mia found herself walking on eggshells, afraid to upset him. The final straw came when Mia discovered something that shook her to her core. While organizing James's home office, she stumbled upon a series of documents that hinted at something far darker than she could have imagined. The Whitmores, it seemed, were involved in a massive money laundering scheme, using their business empire to hide illegal activities. Mia was horrified. She knew she couldn't stay silent, but she also knew the risks of confronting James and Jack. Torn between her moral duty and her fear, Mia confided in Sarah, who urged her to go to the authorities. But before Mia could act, she vanished. One morning, she didn't show up for work. Her colleagues grew concerned when she didn't answer her phone or respond to messages. James claimed she had gone on a spontaneous trip to clear her head, but her family knew better. Mia would never disappear without telling them. As the days passed, the Whitmores' explanations grew more vague, and the sense of unease deepened. Something was terribly wrong, and the truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. When Mia Chozen didn't show up for work that Monday morning, her colleagues immediately knew something was wrong. Mia was reliable, the kind of person who would call or text if she was running late. But that day, there was nothing. No call, no message, no explanation. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and her social media accounts, usually active with updates and photos, fell eerily silent. Concerned, her coworkers reached out to James, who calmly explained that Mia had decided to take a spontaneous trip to clear her head. He assured them she was fine, just needing some time away. But Mia's family wasn't convinced. They knew Mia would never disappear without telling them, especially not without her phone or purse. As the hours turned into days, Mia's family grew increasingly frantic. They filed a missing persons report, but the police initially treated the case as a low priority. The Whitmore's influence in the community was undeniable, and James's calm demeanor and insistence that Mia was simply taking a break seemed to sway the authorities. Jack Whitmore, James's father, added to the narrative, dismissing Mia's disappearance as a young woman's tantrum and suggesting she would return when she was ready. But Mia's family refused to back down. They organized search parties, plastered the town with missing person flyers, and used social media to spread the word. The community rallied behind them, but the Whitmores remained oddly detached, their responses cold and calculated. Then, a week after Mia's disappearance, a breakthrough came. A hiker in a remote forest area stumbled upon an abandoned car. It was Mia's, a sleek black sedan that James had gifted her on their first anniversary. The car was parked haphazardly as if it had been left in a hurry. Inside, investigators found Mia's purse, her phone, and a jacket she often wore. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no evidence of foul play. But the location raised immediate red flags. The forest was miles away from anywhere Mia would have gone voluntarily. It was desolate, isolated, and completely out of character for someone like Mia, who disliked remote areas and rarely ventured far from the city. The discovery of Mia's car shifted the investigation. What had initially been treated as a possible case of a woman needing space was now a full-blown missing persons investigation with suspicious undertones. The police began to dig deeper, interviewing friends, family, and anyone who had seen Mia in the days leading up to her disappearance. They learned about the tension in her marriage, James's controlling behavior, and Jack's disdain for Mia. They also uncovered whispers about the Whitmore's shady business dealings, though nothing concrete enough to tie them to any crime. Meanwhile, James and Jack continued to downplay the situation. James maintained his story that Mia had left on her own, while Jack dismissed the growing scrutiny as media sensationalism. But their calm facade began to crack as the investigation intensified. A neighbor came forward, revealing that they had heard a loud argument coming from the Whitmore estate on the night Mia disappeared. Another witness reported seeing James and Jack loading something heavy into the trunk of their car late that same night. These details, combined with the discovery of Mia's car, painted a troubling picture. The police obtained a warrant to search the Whitmore estate. What they found sent shockwaves through the investigation. In the basement, forensic teams discovered traces of blood that matched Mia's DNA. The Whitmores were arrested on suspicion of foul play, though they vehemently denied any involvement in Mia's disappearance. James claimed the blood was from a minor accident Mia had weeks earlier, while Jack accused the police of targeting his family out of jealousy and prejudice. But the evidence was mounting, and the Whitmores' once impenetrable facade was beginning to crumble. The question on everyone's mind was clear: what had really happened to Mia Chozen? As the investigation into Mia Chozen's disappearance deepened, the Whitmore family's carefully constructed image began to unravel. What had once been a symbol of wealth, power, and respectability now seemed to hide a much darker reality. Investigators started piecing together a troubling portrait of James and Jack Whitmore, uncovering secrets that had been buried for years. James, though charming and polished in public, had a history of violent outbursts that had been quietly swept under the rug. Former employees and acquaintances came forward, revealing instances of his temper flaring over minor disagreements, often leaving those around him intimidated and fearful. Jack, on the other hand, was a master manipulator, a man who had built his empire on a foundation of ruthless business practices and questionable alliances. Rumors of his involvement in illegal activities had circulated for years, but no one had ever been able to prove anything until now. The discovery of Mia's blood in the Whitmore estate's basement was a turning point. Forensic experts determined that the bloodstains were recent, contradicting James's claim that they were from an old accident. The police also found evidence that the basement had been hastily cleaned, with traces of bleach and other cleaning agents detected in the area. This suggested a deliberate attempt to cover up a crime, and the Whitmores' explanations grew increasingly flimsy under scrutiny. Despite their protests of innocence, the evidence against them was mounting, and the public's perception of the family began to shift dramatically. Then, a key witness came forward. A former employee of the Whitmores who had worked at their estate for over a decade. He revealed that on the night Mia disappeared, he had overheard a heated argument between Mia, James, and Jack. The voices were raised, and, though he couldn't make out every word, he distinctly heard Mia shouting, "I know what you've done," followed by the sound of a struggle. The employee, fearing for his job and safety, had stayed silent until now, but the discovery of Mia's blood and the growing public outcry compelled him to speak up. His testimony added weight to the theory that Mia had been silenced because she had discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. As investigators dug deeper into the Whitmores' business dealings, they uncovered a web of financial irregularities. Documents seized from their offices revealed a complex money laundering scheme involving shell companies, offshore accounts, and illegal transactions worth millions of dollars. It became clear that Mia had stumbled upon this operation, likely while organizing James's office, and had planned to expose it. This discovery provided a motive for her disappearance. The Whitmores couldn't afford to let her reveal their secrets, so they had eliminated the threat. The police also learned that Jack had a long history of using his wealth and influence to manipulate and intimidate anyone who posed a risk to his empire. Former associates described him as a man who would stop at nothing to protect his legacy, even if it meant resorting to violence. James, though less calculating than his father, was deeply loyal to Jack and had been groomed from a young age to prioritize the family's interests above all else. Together, they formed a dangerous duo, capable of orchestrating a crime as chilling as Mia's disappearance. Despite the mounting evidence, James and Jack continued to deny any involvement in Mia's disappearance. They hired a team of high-powered lawyers who worked tirelessly to discredit the investigation, claiming that the police were biased and that the evidence against them had been fabricated. But the public wasn't buying it. Mia's story had captured the nation's attention, and people were demanding justice. As the case moved closer to trial, the question wasn't just whether James and Jack were guilty, it was whether they would finally face the consequences of their action. The Whitmores' empire of wealth and power was crumbling, and the truth about Mia's fate was closer than ever to being revealed. The trial of James and Jack Whitmore was a media sensation, drawing national attention as the shocking details of Mia Chozen's disappearance and the Whitmores' alleged crimes came to light. The prosecution painted a damning picture of greed, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder, presenting evidence that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Witness after witness took the stand, each adding another piece to the puzzle of what had happened to Mia. The Whitmores, once untouchable figures of wealth and power, now sat in the defendant's chair, their expressions unreadable as the case against them unfolded. The prosecution's star witness was the former Whitmore employee who had overheard the argument on the night Mia disappeared. His testimony was chilling. He described hearing Mia confront James and Jack, her voice trembling with anger and fear as she accused them of illegal activities. He recounted the sound of a struggle, followed by an eerie silence. When asked why he hadn't come forward sooner, he admitted he had been terrified of the Whitmores' retaliation. His account was corroborated by forensic evidence, including the bloodstains in the basement and the traces of cleaning agents that suggested a hasty attempt to cover up a crime. Another key piece of evidence was the financial records seized from the Whitmore estate. Prosecutors presented documents that detailed the family's involvement in a sprawling money laundering operation. They argued that Mia had discovered these records and had planned to expose the Whitmores, putting their empire at risk. This, they claimed, was the motive for her murder. The defense tried to downplay the significance of the documents, arguing that Mia had no proof of wrongdoing and that the Whitmores' business dealings were legitimate. But the jury wasn't convinced. The sheer scale of the operation and the lengths to which the Whitmores had gone to hide it spoke volumes. The most shocking moment of the trial came when a second witness took the stand, a former business associate of Jack's who had been involved in the money laundering scheme. He testified that Jack had confided in him about Mia's discovery and had expressed concern that she would ruin everything they had built. According to the witness, Jack had said, "She's a loose end that needs to be dealt with." This testimony was a bombshell, directly implicating Jack in the plot to silence Mia. The witness also revealed that Jack had manipulated James into participating, playing on his son's loyalty and fear of disappointing his father. The defense fought back aggressively, trying to cast doubt on the witness's credibility and accusing the prosecution of relying on circumstantial evidence. They argued that there was no body, no murder weapon, and no definitive proof that Mia was even dead. But the prosecution countered with a compelling narrative. Mia had been lured to the Whitmore estate under the guise of a family meeting, where she was attacked and killed. Her body was then disposed of in a location only the Whitmores knew, ensuring that it would never be found. The jury was presented with a timeline of events, phone records, and forensic evidence that all pointed to James and Jack's involvement. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the Whitmores' carefully constructed world was falling apart. The once powerful family was now the subject of public scorn, their wealth and influence no longer enough to shield them from justice. The prosecution's closing argument was emotional and powerful, urging the jury to hold James and Jack accountable for their crimes. Mia Chozen was a brave woman who stood up to corruption, the prosecutor said. She paid the ultimate price for her courage. Don't let her death be in vain. The jury deliberated for days, and when they finally returned with a verdict, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. James and Jack were found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, Mia's family wept with relief, knowing that justice had finally been served. But the story didn't end there. The Whitmore's empire crumbled, their legacy forever tainted by the crimes they had committed. And though Mia's body was never found, her memory lived on as a symbol of courage and the fight for justice. The verdict sent shockwaves through the community, marking the end of the Whitmores' reign of power and privilege. James and Jack were led away in handcuffs, their expressions a mix of defiance and disbelief. For years they had operated above the law, shielded by their wealth and influence, but now they were just two men in orange jumpsuits, facing the consequences of their actions. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, relief, anger, and sorrow. Mia's family, though grateful for the verdict, knew it didn't bring her back. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a friend, and no amount of justice could fill the void she left behind. In the weeks following the trial, the full extent of the Whitmores' crimes came to light. Investigators uncovered more details about their money laundering operation, revealing a network of shell companies and offshore accounts that spanned multiple countries. The case sparked a larger investigation into white-collar crime, leading to the arrest of several high-profile individuals who had been complicit in the Whitmore schemes. The family's empire, once a symbol of success, was dismantled piece by piece. Their assets were seized, their businesses shut down, and their name became synonymous with corruption and greed. Mia's story resonated far beyond the courtroom. Her bravery in standing up to the Whitmores inspired countless others to speak out against injustice. A foundation was established in her name, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse and financial exploitation. Her family worked tirelessly to ensure that her legacy would be one of courage and hope rather than tragedy. They organized memorials, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns, turning their grief into a force for good. But even as the world moved on, questions lingered. Mia's body was never found, and the exact details of her final moments remained a mystery. Some speculated that James and Jack had taken the secret to their graves, while others held out hope that one day the truth would come to light. The forest where Mia's car was found became a place of pilgrimage for those who wanted to pay their respects. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes lined the spot where her car had been abandoned, a poignant reminder of the life that had been taken too soon. For James and Jack, life behind bars was a stark contrast to the luxury they had once known. Stripped of their wealth and power, they were forced to confront the consequences of their action. James, in particular, struggled to adapt to his new reality. Reports from prison suggested that he had become withdrawn, haunted by guilt and regret. Jack, ever the manipulator, tried to maintain control, but even his influence had its limits. The once mighty Whitmores were now just two more inmates, their names fading into obscurity. As the years passed, Mia's story became a cautionary tale,